You're listening to TFM.
Want to join in the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode? Join the Babel Conference, our listeners' discussion group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field, and we'll look forward to seeing you there. Hello and welcome to TFM's local watering hole. I'm just so excited to be back, and with me this week is intergalactic superhero Christy Morris. Christy, how are you doing today?
What is up? I'm so excited to talk about this. And speaking of, thanks for bringing up intergalactic being part of this movie. Shout out to the Beastie Boys.
You're welcome. You're welcome. You see what I did there? That's
very
right.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, we are going to be talking about The Marvels, the latest film in the MCU that just hit theaters. Before we get there, of course, hey, thank you as always so much for listening. Of course, you can find us wherever podcasts can be got or had or whatever it is that you do with podcasts. Of course, you can find us there. Please subscribe, and you'll get the shows as soon as they drop. Another thing you could do to help us out, we would really appreciate, is by giving us a star rating and a review, a written review on a place like Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Those things really help the show grow, help people find the show. Of course, is the best way, to get podcasts to grow is just to share them with friends and family. And you can also do that on social media. And to do that on social media, you just want to follow us on Twitter at the 602 Club. We're on Instagram at the 602 Club TFM. Of course, we're on Facebook with the entire network. Facebook at facebook.com/TrekFM. There's a listeners-only discussion group there as well on Facebook called the Babel Conference you can join. Just type Babel into the search field there on Facebook and you can find us. Of course, you can find us online at trek.fm and see all of the shows that are happening here on the network. And you can go over to Patreon at patreon.com/TrekFM and make sure that everything we're doing here can keep coming to you each and every week. It's a big process to put all of this together. We could use your help. So again, that's patreon.com/TrekFM. So, Christy, it feels like forever since we talked about the original Captain Marvel that came out, I think, in Phase 3 of the MCU as we were gearing up towards the final end of the Infinity Saga. And so, as we were, coming into this film, The Marvels, which was going to combine a few different characters here of Miss Marvel, Captain Marvel, and Captain Rambeau. I was just kind of wondering, were you excited about this movie coming into it? Having seen the trailers, I'm guessing. Were you looking forward to it? How are you feeling coming into this next installment in the MCU?
I was a little trepidatious about this one just because of the sheer amount of things that had to come together to make one cohesive story. And we'll get to later whether or not we think they did it successfully or not. But I did at least, watch all of the source material that they put into then making this happen with WandaVision, and then also Miss Marvel, of course, which we talked about on here. And was obviously interested to see more about these characters and see how they came together, but just a little unsure of whether or not it would work. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think in some ways I felt the same way. I enjoyed Miss Marvel. I thought it was a really good show, especially as the Disney Plus shows have gone for the MCU. It was one of the better ones. It was a real surprise for me. I think Iman Vellani, who played Kamala Khan, obviously too, was somebody who really stuck out to us in her portrayal of Miss Marvel. Mm-hmm. So that was all exciting. I thought the idea of, being able to have Brie Larson back and hopefully, kind of give her a more maybe expanded range, as this character, kind of let her be almost like a real human being instead of kind of this stoic, almost like emotionless thing that she was in the first movie would be great. We talked about WandaVision, of course. I did not like that series at all. I'm not really familiar with the character that Monica Rambeau was playing. I don't even, she doesn't even have a code name in this movie, because she doesn't want one. And so, the whole idea of bringing all of them together, it was a fine idea. It could be really fun, but like you, I found myself just kind of definitely trepidatious, especially seeing, the previews. I think the previews kind of made this movie feel quite silly. And they even talked about, this being one of the funniest Marvel superhero movies. And so I was a little bit worried going into that. And so, yeah, I'm in many ways, I think pretty much on the same page as you coming into this one. And, it hasn't been a great run going into phase 5 now of films. And so, but at the same time, it's like, oh gosh, I just want this to be good because, it's getting harder to be excited about many of these Marvel projects. And so, you talked about this idea of okay, we have a lot to bring together. And so I thought kind of a great place to start, and then allow us to then kind of dive into a bunch of other things, would be just with the plot of this film. And the whole plot is predicated on a decision that Carol Danvers had made quite soon after she had become Captain Marvel and fought the Supreme Intelligence, which led her to go to the Kree homeworld of Hala and destroy the Supreme Intelligence there, that then led to a civil war that completely decimated their planet. And so the whole basis of this story is this Kree leader, Dar-Ben, has unified the Kree people under her, and is looking to harness the power of a quantum band that she finds. We find out that's what Kamala Khan's band is called. She finds its equal, and in a lot of ways, it turns into the plot from Spaceballs, where planet Spaceballs is trying to steal the air from Druidia, but they're stealing the air from a planet, the water from another planet, and then they're trying to steal our sun. Basically, they're trying to hurt 3 different worlds that Carol Danvers has called home. So it's a revenge plot, but it's also a plot about
survival.
Exactly. And of course, we have this entanglement of the powers of Carol Danvers, Kamala Khan, and Monica Rambeau through an anomaly that gets created when Dar-Ben uses the quantum band for the first time and opens a new tear and a jump point. And so that's what kind of brings all these characters together. So just as to the plot of the film and just kind of how this brings everyone together, did that all work for you? Is this something that kept your interest, as we're watching this movie? And I should say, too, this is one of the absolute shortest Marvel movies there is. I think it's an hour 45. So this movie, kind of moves at a breakneck speed.
So I think for sure it was possibly going to be complicated with not only the source material being made into film, but then also having 3 leads technically that you're constantly rotating back and forth between. But I think that overall the story was interesting. not necessarily that it was executed as well as they hoped, but I think also it's just because there's the vast amount of things that they're trying to cram into this movie. I think that it is a great idea that they had Carol then dealing with the fallout of her decision, and sort of a reminder that in real life, you can't just go in and destroy something for an entire planet or country or whatever, that, and then leave them defenseless or without a leader. Anytime that happens, obviously it's possible that it's going to lead to civil war because they have to have some kind of leader to take control again and, run things. So without the Supreme Intelligence, it was like, who was going to step forward? They didn't know. So in that sense, you can't really blame the Kree for being upset because she took the only thing they had to guide them. And then it led to all of these other environmental issues that caused them to have to look for other resources.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the most interesting parts about this, as you mentioned, is Carol's dealing with the ramifications of her rash actions without actually thinking through, like you mentioned, those ramifications. Mm-hmm. And the whole idea of, and it was interesting, I could totally see somebody's thought process on, intervention in the Middle East.
Right.
But the idea of, okay, so if you take away the leadership or of something like the Supreme Intelligence, which is also for many, Kree, a kind of religious artifact for them as well, something they basically worship. You're creating a religious civil war, a civil war in general between people because, the loss of that becomes a vacuum that you then have to fill with something. Mm-hmm. And Carol doesn't try to do that, and she doesn't even try to explain to the people as to why, she just acts unilaterally. And so I 100% agree. I think to me, that's actually a really fascinating idea, that the movie is built upon the mistake of a hero and their goal to try and rectify that mistake. So I think all that was great. And of course, it allows then to kind of have the characters be brought together, with this idea of the quantum band and there being two of them, and, that she's looking for the second quantum band so she can hopefully, have enough power to make all the things she needs to happen. And, we learn about the creation of the jump points throughout space with these quantum bands and all this type of stuff. So, I mean, there's a lot of really interesting stuff in here. And so I think it was hysterical to me when I realized, though, that the plot was very similar to Spaceballs. I'm as we're talking though about the plot and everything here, does this I guess what I'm trying to ask is this movie long enough to try and really give, I guess, enough weight to some of the storylines that are here? Especially, I think, maybe, allowing us to dig in deeper with Carol and the ramifications that have happened for her, and all of that. Plus, maybe, I guess I'm coming down on it. It feels like there needed to be maybe 10 more minutes to this movie just so we could have some more time with Carol Danvers and even maybe the villain, and to be able to give them even more to work with for this story.
Oh, I definitely think so. I will say for sure I wanted more background between Carol and Monica about Carol leaving and Monica Rambeau thinking she would be back any day now and then just never returned. I think we're just scratching the surface with everything that they needed to talk about. And especially in the scene where they're wearing the headbands and exploring memories, I thought was so good. But still, we just needed more background on that, or more time between just the two of them to sort things out, because I do feel like we leave that hanging in the air. And more time with the villain to see her motivation for becoming the new leader. We get the background on why there was a vacuum and what they're doing now to fix things that are wrong with their planet, but not why Dar-Ben specifically is the one to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think all of those are great points, and definitely places that I thought of as well. And so just, completely agree with your assessment of the things that I think needed more time. And again, I don't think that it needed to be, this needed to be a 2-hour and 45-minute movie or something.
Right.
I think, again, this movie could have been like 150 running length, 155, and maybe even just straight up 2 hours. And I think you would have just allowed some of these storylines to be able to breathe more. And specifically, I think, and I'll call out, I think the absolute highlight of this film, and the best part about this film, I think, is just this team of, Danvers, Rambo, and Khan. All three of them, when they're together and when they're just, kind of learning to work together, when they're learning to kind of work through things with one another, specifically like you mentioned with Carol and Monica and their relationship, but even, the way in which, Kamala is kind of like, in many ways, like the Spider-Man character in Infinity War, where, he's thrown into space and like he's just totally out of his element, right? And so she is. And so I think just all of their interactions and their relationships that they're building was wonderful. I think it also was great because it really allowed them to be, I think, authentically women in the movie, and just be very real, which was great, I thought, in their interactions, and just the way that they were, nobody here was forced to be stronger than they needed to be or tougher than they needed to be. Like there was real emotion happening. Like, I think all of that was just so great. And so to me, like, I loved kind of watching this movie when it was just the three of them on a journey together. And it's almost like, if the movie wasn't longer, I wish the movie had been reformatted so a majority of the movie was really just about this road trip, this, space trip, right, with these three characters, and everything else being completely tangential to that.
I definitely agree with that. I think the three of them on screen bounce off each other so well. I think that it was the most fun seeing them figure out how their powers relate to each other and how they're also all kind of different forms of bending and using light was cool. And also, I really loved the angle that you mentioned of Kamala being excited to be a superhero, but not realizing all of the responsibility that comes with it. And so experiencing serious decisions for the first time that other superheroes have to deal with in the MCU.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Experiencing loss of Monica Rambeau, but also in a good way, the selflessness that heroes give in order to save the greater number of people by giving their life. So, I think that she is leaving the ship at the end as a completely different person because she now realizes the weight of what's really involved in being a superhero and being an Avenger. It's not just having fun doing awesome stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's so well said. And I think, again, this allows in a way that she hasn't gotten the chance to before. I think, we really get a chance to see who Carol Danvers is as a character, right? Like, as she's working through the trauma of having made this decision and having had it go kind of horribly wrong, and the way that that's impacted her relationships, specifically with Monica. And, of course, and I think one of the things, like, again, if the movie had been a little bit longer, you would have also been able to see the heartache that, Carol would have felt when, Monica had been lost in the blip, right? Mm-hmm. Like, one of the biggest people in her life is gone. Fury was as well, but, nobody meant more to her than the Rambos. And so to have lost her in that way, I think would have been nice to have seen some of that too. So yeah, I mean, I think, again, though, this movie has a really great center to it, and it's these three characters and their interactions together, which are incredibly fun to watch. It's the thing where, as you're watching it, you're just like, man, I just want more of this. Mm-hmm. I kind of want a whole movie of just this. And in some ways, I feel like, I think some of the other storylines get in the way, and I feel like specifically the Fury storyline with the Khan's family, mm-hmm. And the whole idea of, like, having to herd cats and needing to save all the people, because the power has gone out on the Saber station, and the best way to save them is to herd them with a bunch of Flurkin. And it's just like, in some ways, I just feel like a lot of that storyline kind of pulls away from the main storyline. And I feel like you could have even just shortened that storyline and given less time to it, and just allowed us to have, and still done the same thing, mm-hmm. but and just given us more time for, I think, the heart of the story, which is these three women learning to work together, but also learning from one another, what it means to be a hero, the different ramifications of what it means to be a hero, the good and the bad, all of that. I just think they could have done a better job with.
And you're right in saying more focus on some other areas that had a deeper character development angle rather than the silliness, I think would have been a great asset here. I think that the creators probably thought the Flurkin was such a strike gold character that it needed to be included even more. And it's like, yeah, I mean, it's cute, and the cat that they have playing it is cute, but it's not central to the story. It's not really necessary. And so giving it that much focus, I think, is a tonal inconsistency with the rest of the tone of the movie. And also taking you off on a wild goose chase that isn't necessary to the story.
I felt like the same thing, and I don't know if you'll agree, but with the singing planet that they go to. That was just one of those things where it's like, it's so overly silly that it was hard to take seriously in any way. And so, therefore, I didn't really care about the planet. And honestly, the idea that, one of the things that Captain Marvel has had to do in her time out in space is, like, help a prince out by getting married, that's funny, but I don't need it to be even quote unquote funnier. Mm-hmm. And I put that in air quotes, funnier, by having this planet be one where they just sing and dance as communication. Like, that was just, it's like you're kind of doing the Taika Waititi Thor thing where you're just taking things to the nth degree, and you just kind of lose me. And again, by having to create these song and dance numbers there, you're just kind of taking away, I think, more important places that you could be shepherding the story and really building into the most important parts of the story.
Oh, absolutely. That was the same way I felt. I think that it, like I was saying earlier, it just, with the tone overall of the movie being more heartfelt and sometimes serious and really focusing on individual character development and trying to keep it down to a few core people, is so much more of a strength than something like this that just doesn't fit with the rest of the movie. It's like you're watching a completely different movie for a couple minutes and then got back to the real story. And so it's not that it's not a cool scene, but it's the wrong movie for it. And doesn't really make you care more about Carol or take an interest in this planet, which is sad because it looks really cool design-wise. I love the costumes, but it's completely different.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, too, I just have to say, for a movie that has 3 female leads and is all about empowerment, that they have Carol marry a man out of convenience, like we're in the olden days of arranged marriages or something. That just really struck me as, it seems like we're going backwards from what the movie was trying to promote, if that's the case. So I didn't love that either.
Yeah, that was kind of an odd thing to me as well. It did seem like a strange choice.
Because, like, she straight up says it's for diplomacy. Like, there's no romance. I just did it because he needed a wife.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess the idea that she's willing to help a brother out, okay. But, I don't know. It was kind of strange.
It's an odd choice.
What did you think of our villain? Because I almost feel like, as we've talked about, that this is another place where she is so bare bones as a villain. There just needs to be more time in the film or something in the writing to help us really connect with them as I mean, to me, this feels like one of the biggest, problems with much of the MCU, which is when the films just kind of have these throwaway villains.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it is. Like we were talking about earlier, she as a person is not really explored as to why she's so upset and why she was motivated enough to become the next leader of the Kree. It feels like it could have been anyone from their planet because they all would be upset. And that it's more the artifacts like the band and the hammer that do the damage to the universe than anything to do with her specifically wielding them. And then she dies. So I think that you don't get enough information about her as a character to care. And then she dies. So it does feel like she's just kind of weak.
Yes. Well, and the thing that I didn't really understand, and they didn't build into her as a character enough, so you understand why she doesn't just take Carol Danvers' offer. Why she, still tries to go through with, murdering everyone. And why she continues with her vengeance. And part of that is because it does feel so truncated as a story for the villain and just everything that happened with the Kree, the Supreme Intelligence, and Carol, because we only see it happen in a quick flashback, that it just doesn't, I think, give us the weight that we need to really feel why then, I thought it was like, okay, for a second, that the villain, Dar-Ben's going to choose the the offer that Carol gives that, hey, I'll come restart your son, and so you don't have to do this. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. We're going to get this reconciliation. And then, no, she just tries to go, homicidal maniac, supervillain.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still going to try and kill, your world by stealing its son. And yeah, it just felt like, oh, we need this character to basically die. So we can have her quantum bands. I don't know. And I just don't care about her then in the end as a villain, where it would have been more interesting for the villain to make the choice to let go of her revenge, and, make a different choice. Mm-hmm. Because that would have created a character then that you could have maybe seen in the future, and so...
Right, like we get this very brief interaction with her and then she's just gone forever. So it's like, so was she ever really relevant? But yeah, I also just wanted to say I didn't love the actress Zawe Ashton. I've never seen her in anything before, but there were just times with her performance that I felt that she was unsure of what she was saying or something like that. It looks like she was questioning it in her mind before she said it, or that she was uncomfortable with the dialogue or something, but she just had this odd expression sometimes that felt like I was anticipating more words to come out of her mouth, or that she had a question or something, and it made me feel like she was never really getting through everything with the delivery the way I would have liked it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. And I honestly do agree with that. I feel like there was just something that she just was not, unfortunately, as compelling as she needed to be. And part of that could have been the writing. Part of that could be performance. When it comes to performance, mostly I put that on the director, because you're there to get the performances out of people. Yeah. And I just don't think it worked. The other thing about this that really kind of bothered me is the film. There were these weird inconsistencies with the rest of the MCU that I didn't understand. So in Secret Invasion, it made it seem like that the only place that the Skrulls were on Earth, because they had been unable to find any suitable world. They even say that. And yet there's been a colony of them in space this whole time? What? Mm-hmm. And then Amir, who is Kamala's brother, was married in Miss Marvel, and yet he spends this entire time with his parents, and she's nowhere to be seen. So, like, it's like, guys, do you not know your own MCU?
Right? Like, they should have gone back and rewatched the shows to make sure it was consistent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up the Secret Invasion point, because I had the exact same thought. With the minute that they go to the Skrulls on this other planet, I was going, wait. Where did these Skrulls come from? Because we had the last of the Skrulls on Earth. You're exactly right. And it doesn't make any sense, because that, timeline-wise, is supposed to have happened before we get here. So somebody needs to do some explaining or apologize because they messed up.
Feige, you got some splaining to do.
But yeah, I like that you brought up about Amir's wife as well, because it is odd. He's always hanging out with his parents. And I guess they're just trying to make the point of, like, their family unit is really close or something, and we just don't get very many shots of them in the movie at all. So they're trying to show that, they regularly have meals together, or, hang out in the living room, I guess. But it does feel a little weird that, he even mentions his wife briefly when they're in space, that he's going to FaceTime her.
Yeah.
But you never see her.
Yeah, which is, again, just the whole thing was weird. And so it's like they enjoyed the interactions between the main family, and they're like, whatever, we're just going to do it.
Who cares about the wife?
It just doesn't. Yeah, exactly. Which is, like, weird. Does not make sense. Mm-hmm. So, what did you think of the effects and the action here for the Marvels?
I thought overall it was good. I've always felt like the effects would be difficult and are a little clunky with the Flurkin, because it's just a weird thing to have to animate, I think, in the first place. But yeah, it looks a little dated, I guess, in the way that those came out. I didn't love any of the scenes with the Flurkins actually having the tentacles come out. And also just kind of one or two scenes that were, I think, a little distasteful. Not that it was horrible, but just gross. Like watching a cat with tentacles clean itself was disgusting. And I get the joke they're going for, but it just was too far for me.
Yeah. I mean, I think the effects are kind of mediocre throughout the entire film for the most part. They're not exciting or earth-shattering. They don't look amazing, but they don't look terrible. They're just kind of there. And, you know, I think the best action sequences in the film are when the three members of the team are fighting together against somebody. I thought all that stuff was really fun.
Or jumping back and forth between places.
when they're trading places with one another. All of that was really enjoyable. And you know, like that's, again, when you're doing this and you're entangling their powers and everything, and so they're having to learn to fight like this. I think all that stuff is fun. And when they leaned into that, I thought it was great. But on a whole, I mean, it's just kind of like it's there. It's happening. You know, there isn't anything overly exciting about the film in that way. And I think that's one of the things too, is just the movie itself feels in many ways so rote, so, you know, just kind of par for the Marvel course, which is like not what you want. You know, after this many movies, you know, you need to start bringing people back in and really wowing people instead of just kind of giving them, you know, mediocre Marvel fare. And because, and I think, you know, we can see it, the box office in this movie was dismal for Marvel. It's the lowest box office for a Marvel opener ever. And that's beating the Eternals, which, you know, this movie, spoiler alert, does not rank at the bottom like Eternals does for me. So, but, you know, they're not doing, I think, what they need to really give people a reason with this movie to want to go. Now, there is something about this film that I've been waiting a long time for with a Marvel film, and that's the music. I thought Laura Cartman's music here for this was gorgeous, like really well done, beautifully symphonic score. Listening to it, you know, there's some nice Williams-esque kind of tinge to it that I love. It's just a really great Marvel score, and I don't say that very often about Marvel movies, but you know, I thought it was great, and it kind of left me floored how much I enjoyed the music in the film.
Yeah, I did enjoy the music here too, and I was surprised, since I've not been familiar with this composer, that it was as good as it was. And then also brought in, you know, some popular music as well with Intergalactic by the Beastie Boys. Although that one's been plugged into other similar movies before. It was good. But yeah, I was impressed by the music. I thought that it fit so well. I think that they paid special attention to it needing to be about the three main characters coming together and representing that heroic stature of Captain Marvel, and the quote, you know, higher, further, faster was great.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, you know, she also did Miss Marvel, and then she's done a bunch of other things that I've never listened to or heard before, or even really seen. So, but yeah, I thought she did a really great job, and so very much enjoyed that. But what did you think? Okay, so the movie ends. Of course, we have a stinger, as all Marvel things do these days. And it turns out that Monica Rambeau didn't die, but the universe that she is in and has had to seal herself in is the universe of the X-Men we knew from the previous X-Men movies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I don't think it was the super exciting stinger they were hoping it would be to motivate me, at least, to see other movies about the characters. It felt a little almost braggy that now X-Men is part of this company and they can include them. But also Beast was one of my favorite X-Men characters, so it was nice to kind of see him again. But yeah, it doesn't give me the excitement and motivation to go see more Marvel movies, which it's supposed to if you're gonna have a stinger. So I just it fell flat for me.
Yeah, I guess the thing about this is I don't understand how this is going to actually work anyway. We know from all the other multiverse stuff, we've seen with the Multiverse of Madness, Charles Xavier, and so we're aware of this idea that these X-Men are a part of the Marvel universe that we know, in the sense that they are a part of another universe in this multiverse. And so, but, I know that they also have the X-Men to be able to bring in, at some point. And so I don't really understand how introducing the X-Men like this it makes sense, why you would be using the old X-Men when I would think that you would want the new version of the X-Men that you're going to use. Mm-hmm. And so, like you said, it just kind of makes it more confusing than it does like, oh, this is amazing, kind of thing. And I just don't really get the choice here. I know one of the things about Ms. Marvel, the show, where they mention that she's a mutant, that she has mutant DNA. That's one of the things about her powers, is that and why she can control the band the way that she can is because she's not just a part of, this other universe, but she's got some mutated genes as well. And so it's like, I don't understand how this plays into all of that. And so, yes, it leaves me more confused than anything else. And like you, I don't find myself thinking, oh, I've got to go see, or I can't wait to know what they're going to do with the X-Men.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And same thing really too, strange. Of if you don't know anything about the comics, and although I know some about Marvel Comics, this I had to even look up. You wouldn't know who the heck Binary is. They just introduce a whole new character and the suit that she's wearing. And it's, in the original universe would be Monica Rambeau's mother, but now she's alive and she's the character of Binary and she's wearing this strange suit we've never seen before. I think that they're not giving enough information for the standard general audience that would not already be familiar.
I had no idea who she was.
I had to Google it. She is apparently Carol Danvers' duplicate. But yeah, that's the extent of my knowledge. So it just wasn't a captivating stinger to make you want to go see more movies.
Yeah. Nope. Well, I guess that leads us to the big question of what will you rate the Marvels?
Okay, I want to give it credit where credit is due. And like you and I both said, the big strengths here are the core team of Kamala, Monica, and Carol. But also there's a lot of things here that needed to be deleted and then more time spent on your core characters instead. So I'm left feeling a little deflated about most of the movie. even in spite of the enjoyable moments. So I think overall for me, this is a 2.5 out of 5 binary suits, because I just wanted it to be more and to get me excited to see future installments and see how all of the shows plus the movies will now be melded together. And I think it also goes back to what you and I have said before of there doesn't seem to be one cohesive direction that this is all going, like there was with Endgame and Infinity War, that everything was leading up to those. It feels like here you've got all these pieces that don't seem to be leading anywhere. And also, not everybody is going to go and watch a series in preparation for a movie. And so they may not even know who Miss Marvel is or Monica Rambeau. And now they're seeing the Marvels and going, who are these people? So I think that they did themselves a disservice by not giving more explanation in the films about all of your characters to make people care. And that's it.
Yeah, I mean, everything you said there, I think is just so on target. You are definitely taking this higher, faster, further than the movie did, for sure. I mean, this movie is slower, sillier, and goofier than it needs to be. And I think it just everything about it is kind of mediocre is the word that comes to mind, you know, and it's kind of sad to me that Marvel has done such a disservice to its female characters when they have a lead in a movie. I mean, Captain Marvel, not a great film. You know, you got Black Widow, not a great film. And this, not a great film. And it seems like they're just unable. And it's not as though it's just the female characters, because of course so much of what they've been doing over phase 4 and now into phase 5 has just been kind of like mediocre stuff. And so I'm right there with you. I'd give this 2.5 out of 5 Flurkin. You know, it's just not great. And the sad part is that the 3 leads together were so charming that the rest of the movie could have been great if they had found a way to really lean in and focus with that. But because so much of the movie isn't that, I'm left with like half an enjoyable movie. Now, I will say, though, it's not like I hated watching this movie.
Sure.
You know, and it's not even it's like, you know, kind of bottom third of my Marvel. But I mean, I'd rewatch this some point on Disney Plus, you know, like it's not like I would hate rewatching it because there were enjoyable things about it. And so, but it's just missing the mark, and that's too bad. So, well, Christy, if people wanted to catch up with you and of course, you know, see what else that you've got going on, where would they find you?
Well, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd at Bespin Bell. And you can catch up with me in the Babel Conference on Facebook. And then if you want to listen to a finished podcast I have with my friends Amanda and Teresa called Sabers and Spells, you can do that on the Skywalking Through Neverland network, Skynet. And what about you?
Well, of course, you can find me all over social media under the name MattRushing02. Outside the 602 Club here on the network, you'll find me with a bunch of other shows, Literary Treks, The Orb, Warp 5, Artificial Tango, and Saddle Up. And then on the Nerd Party Network, you'll find me with 2 shows. One is completed, called Owl Post, with Drea Kaufman, talking about every single chapter of Harry Potter, and Aggressive Negotiations with John Mills. We talk about Star Wars each and every week. But thank you so much for joining us.
And y'all come back now, you hear?
Mm-hmm.